without any further ado, we have Laura Archuleta from Jamboree Housing.
Thank you, and I just want to first start off by thanking you all for being here, to take a Sunday to come out to hear about this, get a little bit of education, hopefully get a little pumped up about what can be done to address this issue. It is just for me, just a real pleasure to see everybody here. I have worked in affordable housing now for 30 years. I started when I was really young, of course. And, you know, bit of the problem is, right, is I'm in it, right? So I'm like in the system, and sometimes it's hard for me to see what's wrong because I'm in it so far. So it's really good to come out to groups like this, and that's why I had asked earlier if we're going to make sure we have time for questions afterwards and thoughts and ideas, so that we can make sure we're not missing a solution to this issue. So I'll tell you a little bit about Jamboree, some of the projects we're working on, and then some thoughts also about how to look at affordable housing and how to house folks who are either living with chronic mental illness or who are experiencing homelessness. So let's start. So Jamboree Housing Corporation, I have been fortunate to be leading this organization now for 18 years. We are housed here in Irvine, and we work throughout the state of California. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. I report to a volunteer board of directors. Our mission is to deliver high quality affordable housing and services that transform lives and strengthen communities, and that our vision is that every person will live in a strong, healthy, sustainable community. So to achieve that vision, we work very hard on our mission, but it also means that we're collaborating with other partners who are fulfilling the rest of this vision. So it's really nice because it's broad and we get to work on all kinds of really interesting projects. There's so many pieces to trying to solve the affordable housing issue. And you heard from two such experts that have their background, right? The educational research background, the policy background, and I am just a project person, although running this company, but I love the deals, and I want to get those deals done, and I'm going to do everything I can to get them done. So we all play, different roles in this solution. Jamboree itself has been developing affordable housing for 27 years. We have currently own over 7,000 units throughout California. We've developed 88 or acquired and renovated 88 properties. Gives you an idea. Over 17,000 Californians live in our properties, so it's quite a few people. We have 475 folks living with chronic mental illness, and we have 700 veterans living in our properties. Now, the majority of those are not in any type of a restricted unit where they have to be a veteran or they have to be living with mental illness or have been homeless. They may be in what I call our plain vanilla workforce housing unit that they're just earning, as these are put up, at the income levels and the income that qualifies them to live in an affordable unit. We also have age-restricted housing for our seniors, a huge need in California. We have 1,700 units that are age-restricted for folks who are seniors who are low income, very low income, extremely low income. Our average household income of our residents is $24,790. So just real quick before I go into this, so you might wonder, well, how did we get these affordable housing units built? So just a little bit of background. One, really, there were two tracks. One of them was, as Caesar talked about, what's called the inclusionary housing model, where we had developers like here in Irvine, the Irvine Company, in other cities, Shea Home, Standard Pacific, others, where they were building a market rate development. The city said, we'd like you to develop 15% of those units for affordable housing, and the developer ended up bringing us in, maybe donated the land to the project, and then we cobbled together the rest of the funding to get it built. So that was one path. The other path has been historically working with city partners. So my background, I went to Cal State Fullerton, undergraduate criminal justice, doing a lot of work in trying to figure out gangs and juvenile delinquency and why do kids turn to crime, how do they lose hopelessness, deteriorating neighborhoods. Then got my master's in public administration, wanted to be a city manager, worked in city government for 12 years, and I loved it. I just happened to have my daughter 20 years ago, and the Jamboree opportunity came up. When I started at Jamboree, we just had a staff of 3. We were really small, and it was the perfect job to take when you had a small child, and I thought, oh, this is gonna be great compared to that city government work where I was working, 8 to 10 hours a day. And then somehow got into Jamboree and we took off, and of course, had 2 more kids, and it was really busy and fun. But, so that's a little bit about how we grew throughout the state. So working with city government, down that path, I knew a lot of people in cities. Affordable housing is scary, and when we talk about why does it not get built, there's a whole lot of reasons. But I'll tell you right now, in Orange County, if you look at, there's a lot of cities that have fired their city manager. They fired their police chief. They've fired their planning director. They've let go their community development director. It's scary to go out on a limb if you're staff and propose a project. I'll tell you right now, when you're in a bureaucracy, it's easier to do nothing than to do something and get hung out there for it. Because the politicians are getting elected every 2 to 4 years. And so they have to keep their constituents happy. So you really have to have a city that is producing is typically a city that has a council whose vision has been communicated well to the staff, and a really good staff that's got education and expertise in getting projects done, that can bring projects forward, that can hold community meetings, that can shape them and gaining support. Just one example, we did a project in Long Beach a few years ago, and we did 12 community meetings before we ever went to the Planning Commission and on to City Council, and we got the project built. But the way the staff person in that city started that meeting, she went to all of them, was she walked into a group like this, or even double the size, and she said, there's gonna be affordable housing built on this site. So we wanna talk about what would you like it to look like? What should the outside, let's talk about, it never was, should this be affordable housing? Never. And that's, so, because that was the vision of the council, it was communicated to staff, she felt she could go in there and say that, then the community could get involved with how it looked. Now, did it get super expensive? It did. Luckily, the city had a lot of money to put in and subsidize it and make it look absolutely beautiful, which is awesome. That's how they wanted to spend their money, probably not getting the most number of units, but at least getting a project built and not having council members recalled or not elected again. So, a city that had figured it out. So anyways, on a bit of a tangent. But okay, so point in time count. You can see here, we talked a little bit about the units, the needs. So up to about 4,800 in 2017. You're seeing an increase in homelessness. I'm telling you right now, and talked to a lot of my friends. I live in Yorba Linda. I have 3 kids. We're involved in all kinds of sports. So we're always talking about, well, what do you do? And going into the whole thing about, well, I do affordable housing. This is the whole thing. There's a, why is there so many homelessness? So you get on that discussion, or people experiencing homelessness. But I can tell you right now, given the recent changes in the tax code and the reduction of funding, you're going to see an increase in homelessness. So you'll continue to see this grow, which is, obviously heartbreaking for most of us, or all of us in this room, I'm assuming because you're all here. So who pays? This kind of came out of the cost study. This shows who's paying to take care of people who are experiencing homelessness. So you can see there's, this is annually in the county. See there's government, non-government, the County of Orange, the hospitals, and the cities. So for the, you're talking about $300 million a year spent to address issues going on with people who are experiencing homelessness. And that is not necessary, that's not housing them. That's just taking care of the issues. So part of the struggle for me with this slide is, again, going back to I like deals, I like projects, we produce a lot. And it's hard for me because who do I go to and say, I'm gonna save you money. If you put $5 million in this deal, you're gonna save X amount of dollars, because there's so many people, different parties, different government agencies putting money in. it's one of the reasons why it's a struggle. So you've got to have somebody with a broader vision. So who has that broader vision? Is it county leadership? Is it elected officials? Is it community organizations like this? I mean, historically in community development, the faith-based organizations have led the charge. You have business, community members, taxpayers, maybe they're the leaders, maybe it's all of us coming together, but it's a difficult one. It's much more difficult than I've had in the past doing my plain vanilla affordable housing with just a city putting subsidy in. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. So, and I think this information is all in the cost study, so you can find that in there. So again, the housing cost versus income, Caesar went over this a little bit, market rates, affordable rates, the average monthly income of people living on the street. So this number's really shocking, and I was back in DC with the Housing Finance Agency and the Federal Home Loan Bank doing this presentation, and we talked about the top 10%. So these are the people who are going into the emergency rooms a couple times a week. They're probably getting picked up by the police quite a bit. They're needing a lot of care and a lot of support. So they're costing $439,000 a year to keep them on the street. And for us to build
Each one?
Each one. And in fact, we were meeting with a board member from Hogue a couple weeks ago, and he said in that meeting to me that he had $9 million Montes, is what he called them. When he got on the board and he went over the books, there were 9 people at Hogue, right here in Newport Beach, that they were spending in just the hospital $1 million a year on, where if they could provide $55,000 a year to put them into permanent supportive housing. So housing that they can live in, they can get support right there on site. It has 24 hours a day on-call, case management, property management. That would be the cost. So it's a huge difference. In Orange County, Jamboree is the largest provider of permanent supportive housing. So we got into this space some time ago, and we have some wonderful expertise on staff. Some of you know Helen Cameron, and Helen has led this charge, and I was talking to her husband Alan earlier. I think she was a little before her time in Orange County, because we're just now catching up to homelessness really being a focal point and addressed, and having these types of meetings. So here's some projects, again, loving the projects. This is Jackson Island, Midway City, 29 apartments for people who have been experiencing homelessness, suffering from mental illness, on-site case manager and property manager. Community room for social meetings, all kinds of amenities. Again, we're talking about very high quality affordable housing. Doria Apartment Homes, to the Irvine Company's credit, we were building a plain vanilla affordable housing development, and I was sitting across the table with Max Gardner. Some of you might have known him from his United Way days. Prior to that, he was president of Irvine Apartment Communities. And I said, what if we put in a handful, we ended up with 15 units for people who are in the mental health system here in Orange County. And he said, absolutely. I was shocked. I was really surprised. You would think the Irvine Company would shy away from that, but they stepped up. We've got it there in Doria. Oh, it's going forward, Jen. Here. There you go. Okay, so anyways, maybe I'm probably over my time, so it's speeding through. So anyways, here's some other projects. Rockwood and Anaheim, a really innovative approach, 70 units. We've got clients from the Mental Health Services Act program, 48 units for families who have kids at risk of homelessness who are in the Anaheim Unified School District. You might have heard of the McKinney-Vento program. It funds those programs at the schools to try to keep their kids in there. And all kinds of community support. It's right on Lincoln. If you drive by and you see it, it's a beautifully designed project. Diamond Apartment Homes in Anaheim. This was the first project to be funded by the Governor's Homeless Initiative. 25 1- and 2-bedroom units. all of them for folks experiencing a mental health diagnosis. And residents pay 30% of their income towards rent. One of the key financing mechanisms to this is what you might have heard historically called the Section 8 program. It's a rental subsidy program where they're only having to pay 30% of their income, so their Social Security, their disability, whatever they have, towards the rent, and the rest of that is paid by the government. Even taking that into account, you still look at that $55,000 a year number and compare the cost savings, even with the rental subsidy. So our project that we have on the boards right now, we have full entitlements. Jamboree actually stepped forward and bought the land, because one of the challenges is getting hold of land, is to build 75 1- and 2-bedroom units for veterans who are have been chronically homeless. A portion of them have a mental health diagnosis, and we plan to start construction in the 4th quarter this year. Because we were fully funded, but because of a variety of reasons, and one of the major ones being tax reform and the corporate tax rate change, the value of what we call low-income housing tax credits that we sell to corporations went down, right? It went down to 35% to 20, whatever it settled at. And so we now have a $2 million gap in this project. We're going out on the streets through the Orange County Community Foundation to try to fund that. They believe that there's funders in Orange County that will put in $2 million, because there's a whole myriad of other financing programs already committed to this for both the housing and the services, that people will step up and put that money in. And so we're charging forward again, put in several $millions of Jamboree's money to take down the land. Studios at Hotel Berry. This is a pretty cool project up in Sacramento, 2 blocks from the Capitol. This was an old SRO type hotel. Initially it was an old hotel, then it became an SRO, then it got closed down. It was in terrible shape, and we were fortunate to get funding from the Sacramento Housing Redevelopment Agency, and we have some mental health units there. We have 25 units for veterans, and so we were able to put that together. So just some kind of closing thoughts. We talked a little bit about our project in Anaheim. So we're Rockwood and some of the other ones. We have a new project in Anaheim we're working on. And we have, in the last 6 months, met with each council person in general about what Jamboree does. We've done 7 developments, very high quality. They're very happy with those developments. They're encouraging us to do more. So we've got a motel. It's an Econo Lodge under contract that we're proposing to convert into permanent supportive housing, do a complete renovation on it, put kitchens in, the whole shebang. And the one thing I can tell you, and I don't think that this again is just specific to Anaheim, is that we then go into the city's planning department and start working through the process, and it is roadblock after roadblock. Now this is not, again, and some of these people I've worked with and I went to my master's program with, so I know them really well. They like us. I don't think that's it. It's very scary. It's very scary to say, okay, we're going to do that project, unless you have really strong leadership on that council saying, we need this. And again, Anaheim, if you might remember, adopted a resolution declaring an emergency. So when I'm in public meetings with the council and with the staff, I'm saying, we're responding to your emergency declaration, and you must be really excited about this project. And we're going to continue to go down that path and try to get that one approved. So let's see. The other thing I wanted to comment, a lot of people, and this might be my criminal justice background, is this early release, and you saw some of the figures there. I think you have to put it in your mind, we were paying for those criminals to live in prison. And what was that costing us? And so now they're getting released early, but there was really no plan on how to integrate them back into society. So should there be money put towards that to help them along? It can't just be this, we're gonna blame the early release program. It's like, well, if you put them back in, it's gonna cost more money, we know that. Then the other thing, and this is always a touchy subject, and I've been thankfully a homeowner for quite a while, but put in your mind, and you all know this, but you don't probably think of it, is that those of you who are homeowners that have a mortgage interest deduction on your tax return, you are getting a huge government subsidy. And that's okay, and I'm not advocating for that to go away. I'm just saying that when people talk about, when you hear people saying, well, why should we be paying for the poor to be in housing? Why should we be paying for the homeless, or for those with mental illness, or those with substance abuse? Remember that we're all getting this really big housing subsidy to help us buy that home. And that's part of our system because that's what's acceptable. And then I know I'm out of time, but I would just encourage you to really, when you vote, local elections are key. I have a father-in-law who's on council. I tell him they have so much more direct impact on your community than you would ever think. And ask them. You see in community forums historically, now it may be changing, but how are you going to address the homeless? How are you going to get more housing built? It's not a topic that's typically discussed at those community forums.